Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters. Jackson Whitfield was the kind of man who appeared to have everything: success, wealth, and the admiration of the corporate elite. Living at the top of a luxury high-rise in downtown Los Angeles, he threw extravagant parties and enjoyed the most exclusive experiences money could buy. But behind the glossy surface, Jackson's personal life was a wreck. His once devoted wife, Emily, had finally walked away, pregnant and heartbroken after uncovering his affair. Now, as the birth of their child approached, Jackson stumbled upon Emily's quiet, careful preparations for the baby. And in a sudden, cutting moment of clarity, he began to understand just how much he had truly lost. Some things he was about to learn couldn't be bought back, no matter the fortune. Jackson Whitfield was born into luxury. His father, Gerald Whitfield, was a property tycoon with commercial and residential holdings spanning the West Coast. His mother, Victoria, was a fixture in elite charity circles, hosting grand galas covered by glossy lifestyle magazines. Jackson received every privilege money could provide: elite private education, top-tier tutors, tennis lessons at the city's most exclusive clubs, and summers spent abroad. Even as a child, he was constantly reminded that the Whitfield name held weight, and that he was expected to shine in every room he entered. From an early age, Jackson learned to glide through life with charm. He knew when to flash a disarming smile or deliver the perfect compliment. But beneath the polished exterior, he longed to define himself outside of his family's shadow. For years, he coasted through life, enjoying the fruits of his inherited wealth with the easy confidence of someone who believed doors would always open for him. It wasn't until he met Emily Lawson that he realized how empty that path was. Emily, raised in a working-class neighborhood in Oakland, was the daughter of Carl Lawson, a city bus driver, and Denise Lawson, a cafeteria worker. From a young age, Emily saw the sacrifices her parents made to keep food on the table and bills paid. She was fiercely determined to forge a better life, for herself and for them, through sheer determination, education, and integrity. When she crossed paths with Jackson during a volunteer initiative in college, their worlds, so wildly different, collided in ways neither could have predicted. Emily had always been driven. Her father's grueling shifts and her mother's long days instilled in her a fire that never went out. She was determined to succeed, to honor her parents' sacrifices with a future they could take pride in. Despite financial hurdles, Emily excelled academically, earning scholarships that placed her among students from affluent backgrounds. But her ambition was always matched by a deep compassion. Whether it was tutoring classmates who were struggling or organizing community food drives, Emily believed firmly in the power of empathy. It was through a university initiative, pairing business students with local leaders to develop philanthropic strategies, that her path crossed with Jackson Whitfield's. At first, she dismissed him as just another entitled heir checking off a resume requirement. But as the program went on, she noticed something deeper behind his polished demeanor, a quiet yearning to escape the golden expectations of his lineage. Jackson, in turn, found Emily's sharp intellect and genuine warmth impossible to ignore. She challenged him with questions that cut through his curated image, seeing the man behind the name. For once, Jackson felt truly seen, not for what he came from, but for who he could be. Their relationship blossomed over shared projects, long talks about creating real impact, and quiet evenings spent crafting business plans that aimed to help rather than exploit. Jackson began envisioning a life beyond LA's elite events, and Emily began discovering a gentler side of him, one hidden from public view. By the time they graduated, Jackson was hopelessly in love. He admired Emily's clear-eyed, grounded view of life and her unwavering values. Emily, cautious at first, came to trust in Jackson's changing vision and growing integrity. He began stepping back from the shallower aspects of his upbringing, directing his wealth into meaningful ventures, with Emily's steady influence guiding him. Of course, whispers started in Jackson's circles. Old friends, used to his carefree lifestyle, couldn't fathom why he'd anchor himself to someone outside their rarefied world. Emily, too, endured her share of judgmental stares, accused of being a social climber or chasing money. But the two of them leaned on each other, finding strength in the love they nurtured. Eventually, Jackson brought Emily to meet his parents, nervously. Victoria Whitfield remained polite but distant, treating Emily more like a candidate than a future daughter-in-law. Gerald Whitfield, always pragmatic, assessed Emily carefully, trying to gauge whether she would elevate Jackson's standing or weigh him down. At a luxurious charity gala, where Emily felt out of place among the glitz and glittering jewelry, she instinctively stepped in to help the short-staffed waiters and found herself deep in conversation with guests often overlooked by the main crowd. Victoria watched in silence, her curiosity piqued. That night, beneath the soft lights of the Whitfield estate's manicured gardens, Jackson handed Emily a small velvet box. She gasped, tears welling up as he knelt and asked her to marry him. Despite the judgments, the skepticism, the stares, they believed nothing could come between them. Their wedding was held at the Whitfield family estate, perched elegantly above the Pacific coastline in Malibu. The ceremony was a rare fusion of opulence and intimacy. A world-class string quartet played for a hand-picked group of elite guests. Yet the vows were so raw and heartfelt that it felt though Jackson and Emily were the only two people beneath the flower-draped archway. A local pastor from Emily's hometown officiated, delivering a touching message about bridging worlds and finding unity through love. For the first year, their marriage felt like something out of a dream. Jackson launched Whitfield Partners, a boutique investment firm centered around socially responsible portfolios, an idea born from his many late-night talks with Emily. While Jackson focused on building the company, Emily dedicated herself to nonprofit work, using her business sense to help small organizations grow. The press quickly caught on. They graced magazine covers as the power couple who merged wealth with authentic purpose. But behind the polished images, pressures began to build. Whitfield Partners expanded rapidly, drawing in high-end clients with complex, demanding needs. Jackson found himself swept into a whirlwind of networking events and overseas conferences. Emily, though equally busy, spent her time in boardrooms of charitable foundations and community centers. Their once cozy evenings turned into quick phone calls from distant time zones, or rushed dinners interrupted by Jackson's buzzing phone, always alive with client messages. Though both made efforts to preserve their connection, Emily could feel Jackson drifting back toward the very world he had once vowed to leave behind. He told her it was temporary, that once the firm reached stability, things would calm down. She wanted to believe him. Neither realized that the cracks had already begun to form. Late nights at the office, exclusive social events, and endless networking slowly became part of Jackson's daily rhythm. He insisted it was all necessary for their shared vision, for the firm's survival. But Emily couldn't ignore what she was seeing. The values they had once built their dreams on seemed to fade, as Jackson catered to wealthy clients driven only by profit. The moral compass that had once guided his work now felt like a shadow of itself. Friends who'd once admired Jackson's transformation noticed the difference. He no longer spoke about community uplift or long-term impact. Those conversations had been replaced by numbers, growth charts, and deals. Jackson no longer spoke of impact with the same fire that once lit up his voice. When Emily raised her concerns, he brushed them off with vague reassurances that once the big contracts were finalized, they'd return to the mission they started with. But in truth, a deep divide was forming between them, widened by Jackson's growing appetite for wealth and prestige, and Emily's unwavering dedication to meaningful, ground-level change. At an exclusive charity gala hosted in Beverly Hills, Jackson was introduced to Bianca Sterling, a stunning socialite and the daughter of a Texas oil baron. She was no stranger to the world Jackson now navigated with ease. Private members-only lounges, elite events, and international business conferences. Unlike Emily, who attended fewer of these high-society affairs, preferring to spend her evenings deep in community work, Bianca made her presence immediately felt. She laughed too freely at Jackson's stories, leaned in too closely during whispered conversations, and radiated a confident, calculated allure. Jackson told himself it was all professional. Bianca's family held powerful connections that could open doors for international growth. But over time, business dinners blurred into drinks that lasted well past midnight. And though guilt flickered inside him each time his eyes fell to his wedding ring, he justified it all as strategic networking. What he refused to confront was the emotional line he was crossing. Emily felt the shift. Even without knowing the specifics, she saw the signs. Jackson creeping in at dawn with half-formed excuses, vague calendar entries, and the faintest trace of unfamiliar perfume on the collar of his tailored suits. When she confronted him, Jackson turned defensive, accusing her of paranoia, of not trusting his work ethic. The tension in their luxury apartment grew dense and cold. Even their housekeepers moved carefully, sensing the volatile energy beneath the surface. In her moments of confusion, Emily thought of the Jackson she fell in love with, the man who once ditched exclusive cocktail parties to paint community murals with underprivileged teens, the one who cracked corny jokes during high-stakes meetings just to make her smile. She didn't want to believe that version of him was gone, so she held on, desperately hoping that if she was patient enough, he'd find his way back. But Jackson was sinking deeper into Bianca's world, a world of endless toasts, whispered alliances, and the seductive illusion of infinite opportunity. One late evening, determined to bridge the growing silence between them, Emily decided to surprise him at his downtown office. Her heart pounding with a fragile kind of hope, she stepped into the building and walked toward his corner suite. Through the frosted glass, she saw the unmistakable shapes, Jackson and Bianca, standing far too close, their silhouettes softly fused by the dim interior light. The moment shattered her. She turned and walked away in silence, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. That night, she confronted him with trembling words and a heavy heart. The denials came quickly, but they couldn't stand against the growing pile of signs, the rumors, the late hours, the scent, the distance. And the look on his face when she named her pain said everything. She could no longer ignore the growing cracks. The argument escalated until Emily, voice trembling, announced she was leaving. With shaking hands, she packed a suitcase, while Jackson stood motionless, his apologies coming too late to matter. The days that followed passed in a haze of regret and self-blame for Jackson. He tried to convince himself he hadn't intended to betray her, that he had simply gotten swept up in the seductive pull of success and affirmation. But no excuse could wipe away the image of Emily leaving with tear-filled eyes and a single suitcase. The penthouse suddenly became a mausoleum, each corner filled with painful reminders of the life he'd carelessly let slip away. Bianca attempted to fill the emptiness with grand parties and lavish weekend escapes, but her glittering world, once enticing, began to feel strangely hollow. Guilt gnawed at Jackson's conscience. The high-powered negotiations he used to relish now seemed meaningless without Emily's steady perspective. He found himself flipping through old photographs, hiking trails in Big Sur, stargazing from a quiet mountain cabin, and laughing together over a shared slice of peach pie at a roadside diner. Each photo reminded him of who he used to be, the version of himself Emily helped shape. Yet pride held him back from going after her. He told himself she needed space, or that his apology wouldn't make a difference now. But none of those justifications soothed his deepening desperation, especially during the silent nights when he lay awake in the penthouse, haunted by the echo of her laughter now missing from the walls. Emily, meanwhile, had moved into a modest apartment in Silver Lake. It was a stark contrast from the high-rise luxury she left behind, but it offered the solitude she craved. She threw herself into her charitable work, trying to find purpose in the aftermath of her heartbreak. She had no idea her world was about to shift again, until the test came back positive, pregnant. The realization tested her strength in ways she hadn't expected. She remembered how she and Jackson had once daydreamed about kids, imagining the sound of tiny feet running through sunlit hallways and picnic blankets spread across Griffith Park. Now, that dream was clouded by betrayal, and the father of her child was a man she no longer recognized. For weeks, Emily told no one. Only Monica Reyes, her childhood friend from East LA, knew the truth. Monica stood by her side without hesitation, driving her to appointments, helping her process the emotional weight of single motherhood. Emily clung to that support as she wrestled with a heavy question. Should she tell Jackson? Would it offer closure or just more chaos? In the end, Emily chose to put her baby's well-being above all else. Still, life has a way of exposing truths at the worst possible moment. Just days later, a distant acquaintance of Jackson's, an administrative coordinator at the same hospital, spotted Emily in the obstetrics wing. Word traveled fast. The news hit Jackson like a lightning bolt. Fear, disbelief, hope, and guilt all tangled together. He reached out to anyone who might know more, calling mutual friends in a frenzy. Was the child truly his? And if so, how could he ever make it right after breaking her trust? He didn't sleep that night. Pacing through the vast emptiness of his penthouse, Jackson found himself staring at the skyline, but not seeing it. Memories of childhood resurfaced. His father's silence at dinner, his mother's sharp gaze whenever his grades weren't perfect. He'd learned young that love had conditions, that affection had to be earned with success and charm. That belief had shaped everything. It was why he feared failure, why he clung to validation from strangers like Bianca, who made him feel admired, even if falsely so. Somewhere deep inside, he'd always feared that if he wasn't perfect, he wouldn't be loved. And now, with Emily carrying his child, that fear twisted into something sharper. What if she saw him as unworthy forever? Bianca scoffed at the possibility, planting doubts in his mind with a cold warning. Emily was probably using the pregnancy as leverage. But Jackson felt something deeper. A pull he couldn't ignore. The guilt that had simmered for weeks now flared into a profound sense of duty. He needed to see her, to see the truth for himself. His first encounter with Emily after learning about the baby was thick with tension. On a chilly Los Angeles morning, he stood in a black coat outside her apartment building in Silver Lake, watching pedestrians rush past. His heart pounded as he spotted her walking down the steps. Emily froze, stunned to see him. The sight of her caught him off guard. There was a softness to her now, a subtle glow that came with pregnancy. But her expression was wary, her eyes defensive. Jackson stepped forward, his hands raised gently in a plea for peace. Emily almost turned away, but something in his face, some flicker of sincerity, held her back. He apologized, stumbling over his words, his voice strained with emotion. She let him walk beside her as she headed to her doctor's appointment. Though the walk was quiet, the conversation fractured by silence and long pauses. Reluctantly, she agreed to let him come, with a firm reminder that this didn't mean she forgave him. Inside the exam room, Jackson sat quietly as the ultrasound began. His eyes locked on the monitor, where the unmistakable rhythm of a tiny heartbeat pulsed across the screen. It struck him like a wave, raw, humbling, unforgettable. In that moment, everything else dissolved. The betrayal, the arguments, Bianca's whispered doubts. All that remained was this fragile life they had created. He reached out instinctively and took Emily's hand. She didn't pull away, but her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. The appointment ended with Jackson making a heartfelt promise to be there for the baby and for her, if she'd let him. Emily said little in return. She wasn't ready to trust again. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, Jackson tried to show his commitment through gestures. Groceries delivered to her doorstep, prenatal vitamins hand-selected and sent with notes, glossy baby catalogs from high-end boutiques arriving by mail. He even offered to cover all her medical bills. While Emily recognized the effort, she also began to feel overwhelmed. It was the same kind of extravagance that had fractured their relationship to begin with. Still, Emily allowed Jackson to attend certain prenatal appointments, recognizing that he had a right to be part of their child's life. Their interactions remained distant, civil, even polite, but a heavy silence loomed between them. Every time Jackson tried to express how sorry he was, Emily offered a cautious nod, unwilling to let him close again too quickly. His breakup with Bianca was chaotic and highly public, providing gossip sites with plenty of ammunition. Enraged by Jackson's renewed involvement in Emily's life, Bianca threatened to expose internal dealings at Whitfield Partners. The tabloids pounced, publishing wave after wave of headlines branding Jackson as a heartless cheater. But none of it stung like Emily's judgment. Her opinion was the only one that mattered. Jackson found himself rereading old text messages and photos of better times, searching for traces of who he used to be, before he let ambition and validation cloud his judgment. Each cruel headline was a mirror to his mistakes, but it was the silent disappointment in Emily's eyes that cut the deepest. He didn't just want to be seen as better. He wanted to be better, for her and now, for their child. Jackson longed for a second chance, but knew better than to expect forgiveness on demand. Privately, he began tearing down the world he had built alongside Bianca. He distanced himself from profit-obsessed clients, choosing instead to align with partners who supported his renewed focus on ethical, impact-driven investing. His once glamorous circle of influencers and deal-makers thinned out, replaced by a handful of professionals who respected his shift. But whether Emily believed the change was real, that remained the great unknown. The reckoning came swiftly. Bianca launched a ruthless campaign across media outlets and blog platforms, spinning a narrative that Jackson had used her name, her contacts, and discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. She leaked private photos of them at upscale galas and industry events, fueling rumors of multiple affairs. Hashtags like Whitfield scandal and millionaire fraud trended for days. Investors began to get nervous. Some wondered if Jackson's personal turmoil hinted at larger issues within Whitfield Partners. His team questioned whether his sudden turn toward philanthropy was sincere or simply a clever PR maneuver. From her apartment in Silver Lake, Emily watched the chaos unfold with mixed emotions. She wasn't interested in the headlines, but she worried about what the fallout could mean for their child. Not because she needed his money, but because the future Jackson had promised their baby now felt uncertain. If he lost credibility, if he lost the business, what would be left? Her father, Carl Lawson, stopped by one quiet afternoon. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, concern etched into his weathered face. He wasn't convinced Jackson could be counted on. Not yet. But he also acknowledged the effort Jackson was making, showing up to doctor's appointments, avoiding public attacks on Emily, and taking responsibility instead of hiding behind excuses. After a long heart-to-heart, Carl advised Emily to trust her instincts. If Jackson was truly sincere, maybe he deserved the chance to earn his way back. And if he wasn't, at least she would know she had given him that opportunity. That evening, Emily found herself scrolling through old photos, images of simpler times, quiet dinners at local diners, shared laughter during weekend getaways, and those long, passionate conversations about making a difference in the world. Beneath the chaos, the betrayal, the headlines, she could still see a flicker of the Jackson she once loved. The question was whether that flicker could survive the wreckage he had caused. Then came the move no one expected. Jackson called a press conference. He stood before a room packed with reporters, wearing a simple navy suit, muted, serious, a stark contrast to the bold high-end wardrobe he used to flaunt. There were no flashy distractions, no slick smiles, and instead of denial or blame-shifting, he told the truth. "I've made serious mistakes," he began, his voice slightly unsteady. "I lost sight of the values that once grounded me, and in doing so, I hurt people who trusted me." He paused, took a breath. "I'm not here to point fingers or make excuses. I'm here to take responsibility and to try to rebuild my life with honesty and humility." He didn't share salacious details. He never mentioned Emily or the pregnancy. He protected her privacy and their babies. At first, the press waited, ready to seize on a slip-up or contradiction. But there was nothing sensational to print, just a man stripped of pretense, owning his failures. Some reporters remained skeptical, of course, but many, though hesitant, acknowledged his candor. Bianca's media campaign lost its momentum. With no fresh scandal to feed on, tabloids shifted focus. Board members at Whitfield Partners, watching nervously from afar, began to relax. Clients sent messages of quiet support, praising his accountability, rare as it was in their world. At home, Emily watched the press conference from her couch. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't know if it would change anything. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive. But for the first time in a long while, she believed Jackson might truly want to be better, not for headlines, but for himself and for their child. It marked a shift. With the media buzz dying down, Jackson redirected his energy toward what mattered most: fatherhood. He found a parenting class in downtown LA and nervously called Emily, voice wavering, to ask if he could come along. Still unsure of her own emotions, Emily hesitated, but said yes. On the day of the class, Jackson arrived early. No tailored suit this time, just a soft slate gray sweater and jeans. He sat beside her, clumsily handling the plastic infant doll the instructor passed around for practice. At first he fumbled, but he listened. He asked questions, He nodded earnestly as the instructor explained swaddling techniques and newborn sleep patterns. He was awkward, but he was trying, and for Emily, that mattered. Emily observed him quietly, recalling the days when Jackson used to scoff at routine responsibilities. Now, he seemed genuinely interested, determined even, to learn how to swaddle, change diapers, and calm a wailing newborn. After the parenting class, they walked side by side to the metro station. Jackson cautiously brought up the idea of joining future doctor's visits, watching Emily's face closely as he spoke. She told him she wouldn't shut him out, but she wasn't ready to forget either. He nodded, accepting her boundary. The moment felt oddly normal, like two people navigating everyday life instead of recovering from months of public scandal and private heartbreak. But underneath that calm exterior, mistrust lingered. Every time Jackson's phone buzzed, Emily tensed. Was Bianca behind the screen again? And Jackson, too, often looked at her with apprehension, as if worried she might walk away again without warning. Still, between tension and hope, they reached a fragile balance. Every step forward became a small test of whether they could really prioritize their child together. Wanting professional guidance, they booked an appointment with Dr. Maya Brooks, an old friend of Emily's who had recently started practicing obstetrics at a leading hospital in downtown LA. Maya offered more than medical care. She brought compassion, someone who neither excused Jackson's past nor diminished Emily's pain. During a routine checkup, Maya gently asked how Emily was really doing. Emily admitted she was scared of becoming a single mom, of trusting Jackson again, of making decisions that might one day hurt her child. Maya listened, then offered simple, steady advice. Ultimately, it's your call whether Jackson plays a role in your life beyond fatherhood, Maya said softly. But if he's really changing, maybe there's space to see what that looks like. Outside in the hallway, Jackson caught fragments of their conversation. He stood frozen, her fears cutting deeper than any article or public rumor ever had. For the first time, he fully grasped how much damage he had done, not just to their relationship, but to Emily's sense of stability and self-worth. Determined to prove he meant every word, Jackson committed to helping in every way she would allow. He cleared his calendar, shuffled meetings, and began declining partnerships that compromised his principles. At Whitfield Partners, he pivoted the business back to its original vision, stepping away from fast money in favor of meaningful impact. Some clients pulled out, but new investors, those who aligned with his mission, began to take notice. It was the reset he didn't know he'd needed. Just when it felt like things might be turning a corner, life struck again. In her third trimester, Emily began experiencing sharp headaches and noticed swelling in her hands and feet. Fearing preeclampsia, Dr. Maya Brooks ordered immediate testing. The results were concerning. Emily's blood pressure was dangerously elevated, posing a serious risk to both her and the baby. If not managed with strict care, the consequences could be devastating. Maya placed her on full bed rest and warned against any activity that might trigger stress. Jackson's response was immediate. He all but moved into Emily's small Silver Lake apartment. He set up a compact work desk in the corner of her living room and immersed himself in caring for her. The nightlife, the black tie fundraisers, gone. Instead, he checked her blood pressure multiple times a day, cooked low-sodium meals from scratch, and documented every detail for Maya to review. Monica Reyes and a few other close friends dropped by on a rotating schedule, offering comfort and support. But Jackson insisted on taking the lead. He wanted to be there, for all of it. For Emily, having Jackson so close was both comforting and complicated. His presence made things easier, physically, emotionally, but the memory of his betrayal remained fresh. Could she truly let him back in? Or was she simply leaning on him for the baby's sake? She wrestled nightly with her own doubts, reminding herself not to mistake support for redemption, care for commitment. The days were long and still, leaving her alone with thoughts she'd tried to suppress. She feared that letting him too close might undo the careful boundaries she'd built to survive the heartbreak. At night, she often lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Jackson worked quietly in the next room, his laptop keys tapping softly as he wrapped up another long day. Then came the moment everything shifted. One evening, a sudden pain gripped Emily's side. Sharp, intense. She burst into tears from both fear and discomfort. Jackson rushed to her side, taking her hand in his and whispering calm, steady reassurances until the pain eased. In that fragile moment, the emotional wall between them cracked. Emily allowed herself to lean into him, not because she had fully forgiven him, but because in that instant, she needed him. Jackson, feeling her trust, however fleeting, made a silent promise. He would never betray it again. The final stretch of Emily's pregnancy became a delicate balance of tension and tentative healing. With her on strict bed rest, emotions had nowhere to hide. Jackson took to his caretaker role with quiet devotion, cooking simple meals, helping her through gentle, doctor-approved stretches, and handling every small task she couldn't do herself. In the stillness of those days, they found themselves opening up again. Really talking. One night, as Emily sat propped against pillows and Jackson flipped through a parenting book, his voice broke with raw honesty. He apologized once more, not just with words but with specifics. He admitted to craving the validation of his wealthy peers. He confessed how ambition had eroded his principles, how he had ignored the hurt in Emily's eyes. This time, there was no defense, no deflection, just the truth. Emily listened quietly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Then, with a voice heavy with emotion, she shared her own regrets too. Maybe she had placed him on too high a pedestal, expecting too much, too soon. Still, cautious as they were, the conversations between Emily and Jackson planted the quiet seeds of something resembling reconciliation. They discussed the possibility of couples therapy after the baby arrived, both acknowledging that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and forgiveness wasn't something to be rushed. But they also revisited what once connected them, their shared belief in honest work, their dream of helping others, and the vision of a family built on something deeper than just status or money. As the atmosphere in the apartment softened, they began preparing for the baby's arrival. Jackson set up a crib in the small spare room, carefully adjusting neutral-colored sheets and hanging a mobile that played soft lullabies overhead. Emily, moving slowly but purposefully, folded baby clothes and tucked them into drawers, pausing often to rest. Every gesture carried the weight of uncertainty, each one a step toward a future neither could fully predict, but both were quietly hoping for. But life has a way of testing even the most delicate progress. Late one night, Emily woke up with blinding pain and blurred vision, classic symptoms of a dangerous blood pressure spike. Jackson was instantly alert. Heart pounding, he called Dr. Maya Brooks, who instructed him to get Emily to the hospital immediately. He drove through the quiet Los Angeles streets at breakneck speed, white-knuckled hands clenching the wheel, eyes darting between the road and Emily slumped beside him. 1,000 regrets pulsed in his mind. Every misstep, every selfish act, now eclipsed by the terrifying thought that he might lose her and their child before he could fully make things right. At the hospital, the diagnosis was clear. Emily's condition had escalated. An emergency C-section was the safest option for both mother and baby. Jackson paced the sterile waiting area, anxiety twisting inside him. In that moment, all the privilege, all the access, all the influence meant nothing. Not if he couldn't protect the two lives that now meant everything. Dr. Brooks appeared finally, composed but direct. She led Jackson to change into scrubs so he could be present in the operating room. The bright surgical lights, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the antiseptic scent, it all faded into the background as he stood beside Emily, gripping her hand. He whispered to her, words of love, apologies, quiet promises to never stray again. Emily, still woozy from medication, gave him a faint smile and met his eyes with silent strength. Then at last, a high piercing cry filled the room. Their daughter was here. Tears blurred Jackson's vision as he watched the nurses wrap the tiny newborn in a white blanket. She was small, fragile, beautiful. Emily, still recovering, exhaled slowly, tears escaping as she stretched out a hand to feel the baby's soft fingers. They named her Lily, after Emily's favorite flower. For a moment, the chaos fell away. But reality, as always, crept back in. Lily was premature. She needed care. Lily spent her first days in the neonatal intensive care unit. Emily's own recovery was complicated. Her blood pressure continued to fluctuate, requiring constant monitoring. Jackson split his time between Emily's hospital room and the NICU, a space filled with the soft hum of machines and quiet, clinical voices. It was there, beside Lily's incubator, that Jackson felt the full weight of parenthood settle into his bones. He would slide his hand gently into the small opening of the incubator, watching in awe as Lily's impossibly tiny fingers curled around his own. At the same time, Jackson found himself in an awkward but inevitable position, facing both sides of their extended family. Carl and Renee Lawson visited frequently, offering Emily emotional support and ensuring she was never alone. Jackson's own parents, Everett and Diane Whitfield, showed up as well. Less aloof than usual, their worry softening years of pride. Even Monica Reyes came by daily, always greeting Jackson with reserved politeness, her caution clear. But no one let old grudges cloud what mattered. Lily's health and Emily's recovery came first. Amid these long hospital visits, Jackson's perspective began to shift. He started to see just how delicate happiness could be, how easily it could all slip away. For the first time in years, he prayed. Quiet, desperate prayers for Lily's strength, for a second chance, for the chance to be the kind of man Emily and their daughter could rely on. As Lily began to grow stronger, so did the fragile sense of hope building in Jackson's heart. Eventually, Emily was discharged, though Lily had to remain in the NICU for a few more days. Jackson returned to the Silver Lake apartment and set everything up to make the transition home easier. He followed the postpartum care instructions carefully, checked Emily's blood pressure multiple times a day, and made sure she rested. It was the closest they had been in months, but this intimacy wasn't about romance. It was about resilience. It was about healing. It was about learning to show up for Lily. There were still tense moments, times when Emily would flinch from his touch or stiffen at the memory of betrayal. Jackson didn't push. They talked when they could, and when they couldn't, they focused on Lily. When the day finally came for Lily to be released from the NICU, Jackson drove them to the hospital, checking and rechecking the car seat installation with trembling hands. Under Emily's watchful gaze, he lifted their daughter, tiny but strong, into the carrier. The drive home was short, but Jackson would remember it forever. City lights shimmered past the windows, like they were welcoming Lily into the world she was finally strong enough to meet. Back at the apartment, they showed her the nursery. A simple, peaceful room with pastel walls and a mobile of glittering stars overhead. Emily eased herself onto the couch, eyes heavy with exhaustion and quiet relief. Jackson placed Lily in her crib with delicate care, then turned to Emily. He took her hand. A year ago, he had always imagined this moment happening in a luxury high-rise, a penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and staff at his beck and call. But now, standing in a modest Silver Lake apartment, Jackson realized something profound. Love wasn't found in polished marble or sweeping skyline views. It lived in the soft glow of a nightlight, in whispered lullabies and midnight feedings. The days that followed were sleep-deprived and chaotic. Lily's cries echoed through the night, waking them at odd hours. Jackson and Emily took turns rocking her, feeding her, changing her. Each moment, though exhausting, felt like a gift to Jackson. He never imagined that something as simple as warming a bottle or holding his daughter as she drifted off could bring such contentment. Emily remained guarded. She didn't offer full trust, not yet. But the steady presence of a partner sharing the load eased some of her weariness. Slowly, conversations about their relationship began to surface again. Tentatively, cautiously, but with a flicker of something new. Hope. They agreed to begin couples counseling. Neither wanted to ignore the past or pretend it hadn't happened. Their first session was raw, tense. Jackson opened up about his insatiable need for approval, his weakness for attention, and how that had blinded him to Emily's emotional needs. Emily, in turn, spoke about the isolation she felt, how she'd warned him about Bianca, how he had brushed off her concerns with condescension. The therapist helped them see that while Jackson's betrayal had caused deep wounds, healing might still be possible, if they were both willing to put in the work. They left that first session emotionally drained, but strangely connected. For the first time in a long while, they were moving in the same direction. Small gestures started to rebuild the foundation. Jackson bringing Emily a warm mug of tea without her asking. Emily inviting Jackson's parents over for a simple dinner to see Lily's progress. Jackson turning down high-stakes deals that didn't align with his renewed priorities. As Lily gained weight and started recognizing their faces, cooing in delight, Emily and Jackson rediscovered glimpses of the connection they once shared. It wasn't perfect, it was messy and hard and still uncertain, but it felt genuine. It felt earned. News of Jackson's personal transformation quietly rippled through his professional circles. Some former allies rolled their eyes, dismissing it as a phase, but others, those attuned to impact and integrity, began reaching out. Investors interested in social good saw promise in the new Whitfield partners. Jackson's passion reignited, not from chasing profits, but from aligning values with work. His balance sheets weren't booming, but they were steady enough to give him what he needed most: time. Afternoons were spent reading books about infant development, helping Emily clean up the nursery, or folding Lily's tiny clothes while she napped nearby. Even mundane tasks became meaningful, soft, ordinary moments of togetherness. Every so often, Emily would catch Jackson gazing at Lily, eyes filled with awe, and remember who he used to be. Before the ambition, before the scandals, when love, purpose, and a shared vision had meant more than any dollar sign. Not everyone was convinced. Bianca remained a lingering question mark, occasionally resurfacing in social circles with sly remarks and thinly veiled suggestions that Jackson's so-called transformation was nothing more than a publicity stunt. But as time passed and her bitterness found fewer allies, her presence gradually diminished from the spotlight. Monica Reyes, ever protective of Emily, kept a watchful distance, but even she eventually admitted that Jackson seemed to be making a genuine effort. Still, Emily battled with occasional waves of doubt. The fear of letting her guard down, only to be wounded again, was difficult to shake. Yet with every counseling session, every shared responsibility, every moment Jackson prioritized Lily, her hesitation softened. Their progress was delicate but real. Like a once shattered vase, now glued back together, not flawless but capable of holding something meaningful again. Months passed. Lily grew stronger, more expressive. She began giggling at Jackson's exaggerated faces, babbling incoherently during diaper changes, and testing her ability to roll over. Jackson relished fatherhood, celebrating every milestone with open awe. In those little moments, Emily saw flashes of the man she had once fallen in love with, someone sincere, attentive, and capable of finding wonder in life's smallest victories. Therapy evolved. The sessions began shifting from unpacking old pain to talking about the future. Together, they explored how to maintain balance between Jackson's business endeavors and Emily's nonprofit commitments. They built boundaries, mutual agreements to ensure neither person felt overshadowed or dismissed. One evening, Jackson floated the idea of eventually finding a more family-oriented home. Not another skyscraper penthouse, but maybe a small house with a yard for Lily to explore. Emily didn't say no, she simply replied, "Let's keep building trust first." Their families took notice of the change. Carl Lawson, once skeptical, acknowledged Jackson's growth during a quiet dinner where he watched him flip pancakes one-handed while calming a fussy Lily in the crook of his arm. Diane Whitfield, initially distant, softened unexpectedly one afternoon when she arrived to find Emily reading bedtime stories aloud, Lily tucked close. The contrast between the simple domestic moment and the opulent galas she once hosted left her momentarily speechless, but moved. There were still rough days. Business stress, sleepless nights, or random flashes of old pain occasionally crept in. But instead of pulling them apart, these challenges became threads, sewing their lives back together, one shared hardship at a time. For Lily's first birthday, they chose a modest celebration, right in Emily's apartment. The penthouse remained empty, a silent monument to a past that no longer fit. Friends and family squeezed into the living room, where balloons bobbed under low ceilings. Lily, perched in her high chair, stared wide-eyed at a single candle before gleefully smashing her hands into the frosting. Laughter rang out from all corners. Diane Whitfield arrived in an understated but elegant dress, clearly out of place among the casual jeans and t-shirts, but as Lily shrieked with glee, something in her eyes softened. Everett Whitfield, ever reserved, pulled Jackson aside and said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Not just for your company, for this." He nodded toward Emily and Lily. Emily's parents beamed, snapping pictures of every silly face and frosting-covered finger. Monica teased Jackson about the apron he wore, bold letters declaring "One Dad." Guests from Emily's nonprofit world mingled easily with Jackson's more corporate connections. Remarkably, the room felt warm, unforced, free of the old performance that once colored every Whitfield gathering. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Jackson and Emily ended up on the floor, sitting cross-legged with Lily babbling between them. The apartment was littered with torn wrapping paper, half-eaten cupcakes, and a sea of baby toys. Jackson and Emily sat on the floor, Lily babbling between them. Their eyes met. Just a quiet glance, but one filled with so much gratitude that it needed no words. Jackson leaned over and pressed a gentle kiss to Emily's temple, whispering, "Thank you for letting me be part of this." Tears shimmered in Emily's eyes as she reached out to gently stroke Lily's soft hair. In that still, perfect moment, they both understood something deeply true. Love wasn't about flawlessness. It was about redemption, about choosing each other again and again, especially when things felt irreparably broken. 1 year after Lily's birth, their lives had settled into a rhythm that was equal parts unfamiliar and comforting. A new kind of normal neither of them could have imagined during the chaos of the past. Gone were the nights of glittering galas and sky-high views, replaced by feedings, diaper changes, and quiet evenings on the living room floor. Jackson still led Whitfield Partners, but his perspective had changed. The business no longer consumed him. Instead, he found unexpected joy in the balance he'd struck. Each morning, he'd rise early to check emails in the soft light before the apartment stirred. When Lily woke, he'd scoop her up gently, letting Emily sleep a little longer. Holding her against his chest, feeling the rhythm of her tiny breath, Jackson often wondered how he'd ever believed anything else could bring him this kind of peace. Sometimes, while holding Lily close, Jackson would catch his own reflection in the window. Unshaven, in old sweatpants, eyes softer than they'd ever been, and he would feel something unfamiliar. Contentment without conditions. The kind of quiet joy his younger self never thought he deserved. Emily, too, was stepping into a new version of herself. Her traumatic birth experience had ignited a deep passion for maternal and infant health advocacy. She began working with nonprofits around Los Angeles, sharing her story, offering hope, raising awareness. She spoke at community centers and medical forums, sometimes with Jackson in the audience, Lily giggling on his lap. Where once they had struggled to reconcile their professional lives, now they moved in sync. Jackson used his contacts to help fund projects. Emily brought a voice grounded in experience and compassion. Their causes became intertwined, his resources meeting her purpose. They still lived in the Silver Lake apartment. The penthouse, though technically still Jackson's, remained untouched. Selling it felt too complicated. Living in it, impossible. It stood as a monument to who he used to be, a version of himself he no longer wished to revisit. It remained there, untouched, a silent reminder of a life Jackson had chosen to leave behind. Sometimes, when his mind drifted, guilt would creep in. Memories of evenings spent in that penthouse with Bianca flickered like ghosts he couldn't quite dispel. But slowly, those echoes began to fade. They were replaced by gentler, brighter moments. Lily's first toothless grin, Emily's soft humming during late-night feedings, the hesitant way she sometimes leaned against him after a hard day. These memories stitched themselves into the tapestry of a new life, one rooted in redemption rather than regret. Therapy remained a cornerstone of their progress. Every other week, they returned to the same warm, understated counseling office where they had once unpacked the rawest wounds of Jackson's betrayal. The leather sofa they once sat on with tension now hosted quieter conversations, refinements rather than repairs. Together, they navigated parenting strategies, clarified emotional boundaries, and practiced the art of forgiveness in real time. Their therapist would occasionally comment on how uncommon it was for couples to recover from such a deep rupture, and even rarer still to grow stronger from it. But Emily and Jackson had stopped aiming to be unbroken. They knew better. Their goal wasn't perfection, it was partnership. A kind where the scars weren't erased, just honored. Meanwhile, Lily bloomed, her every milestone a metaphor for their own healing. She had started to toddle, gripping coffee tables and chairs for balance. Her babbling now resembled real words, and when Mama and Dada emerged, albeit with some hilarious variations, both parents were swept up in laughter. One sunlit afternoon, Jackson crouched on the rug, arms wide, encouraging Lily to take a few tentative steps toward him. Emily stood nearby, snapping pictures on her phone, the tiny living room bursting with joy. The air itself seemed to pulse with something rare and hard-won: peace. As Lily's second birthday approached, they made the same decision they had the year before: to celebrate at home, in the Silver Lake apartment. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. On the day of the party, sunlight streamed through the windows. Balloons drifted lazily along the ceiling. A tight circle of loved ones crowded into the room. Diane Whitfield arrived in a cotton dress, still adjusting to the cozy chaos, but smiling earnestly, determined to fully participate in her granddaughter's celebration. Everett trailed in behind her, holding a small stuffed giraffe with endearing awkwardness. In Everett's large hand was a gift he had chosen himself, something soft, with hand-stitched details that hinted at genuine care. Across the room, Carl and Renee Lawson beamed proudly, snapping photos of Lily perched chair, wide-eyed as she stared at the flickering candle atop a tiny cake. Monica Reyes, Emily's childhood friend, orchestrated the gathering with her usual mix of bossiness and humor, making sure everyone had a slice of cake and a place to sit. When Lily plunged her chubby hands into the frosting, a round of laughter swept through the room. From a corner of the apartment, Jackson stood quietly, taking it all in: the swirl of joyful voices, the blur of colorful balloons, the mess, the love. It was a far cry from the grand galas once hosted at his penthouse, and yet this felt infinitely richer. At one point, Everett stepped aside with Jackson. The once formidable businessman seemed smaller now, softened by age and perspective. "Son," he said quietly, his voice catching, "I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've done with Whitfield Partners. For choosing what matters." Jackson nodded, throat tight. It was just a sentence, but it held more weight than any boardroom praise ever had. As the evening drew to a close and the last slice of cake disappeared, the apartment settled into a calm hush. Wrapping paper, ribbons, and half-inflated balloons were scattered across the floor like souvenirs of something rare. Lily was yawning in Emily's arms, blinking drowsily against the warm glow of the floor lamp. Jackson gathered a few plates, intending to tidy up, but Emily stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Leave it for tomorrow," she murmured, already heading toward Lily's nursery. Once Lily was tucked into her crib and the apartment felt still, Emily and Jackson returned to the couch. They sank into it side by side. The weight of the day tugged at their limbs, but the air between them was warm and easy. Jackson reached for her hand slowly, cautiously, lacing his fingers through hers. She didn't pull away. For a long moment, they sat in silence, and then Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never thought we'd get here," she whispered. Jackson turned, his face open, eyes soft. "Me neither," he replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'm so grateful we did." In that quiet moment, the storm of their past, the betrayal, the grief, the sleepless nights in hospital corridors, the raw sessions in therapy, settled like dust on a windowsill. Still present, still real, but no longer defining them. What remained was a new bond, delicate but unshakable. One forged not through perfection, but through truth, forgiveness, and the quiet courage to try again. A few days later, Jackson suggested they revisit the small diner in East Los Angeles, where he and Emily used to share late-night slices of pie during their college days. Emily hesitated. Lily's nap schedule was still unpredictable, but eventually nodded. Together they buckled Lily into her car seat and drove across town, past traffic lights and sprawling murals. The neon sign of the diner blinked softly in the dusk, just as it had years before. They slid into their old booth, the cracked vinyl still familiar. Around them, a few regulars glanced up with curiosity at the young family. Lily's wide eyes scanned the laminated menu, her little hands grabbing at the salt shaker and sugar packets. Emily and Jackson exchanged sheepish smiles. They ordered 2 slices of apple pie, an old favorite, and took turns feeding Lily small spoonfuls of mashed banana. The taste of the pie stirred something deeper. Memories of who they used to be, and hope for who they might still become. Jackson looked across the table and saw Emily watching Lily with adoration. Then, for just a second, she looked at him, not with hurt or suspicion, but something gentler, something healing. Beneath the table he found her hand, their fingers laced together, Warm, familiar, steady. There, in the heart of East LA, with the hum of neon and the clink of diner plates all around, they let themselves believe in a future again. One they'd rebuild slowly, deliberately, reshaped by the fire they had walked through. They had traveled a long, painful road, from betrayal and heartbreak to forgiveness and grace. Every choice to stay, every hour spent rebuilding trust had been like another stitch in the fabric of their second chance. Now, as Lily giggled in Emily's arms, Jackson realized what truly mattered. The real treasure in life wasn't status or wealth or rooftop views. It was this: the soft hush of evening light, a shared booth at a humble diner, and the quiet certainty that love, when nurtured, could rise from the ashes. They were a family shaped by hardship, but bound by something stronger than any wound. Hey, our amazing friends, if you're still here, still listening right now, something in this story must have touched your heart in some quiet, powerful way. And maybe, just maybe, you're sitting with questions of your own, about forgiveness, second chances, or the kind of love that isn't perfect, but is brave enough to try again. This story reminds us of one profound truth: sometimes the obstacle is the way. That's not just a quote. It's a Stoic principle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And isn't that what Jackson and Emily's journey really is? Their love wasn't flawless. It was shattered, rebuilt, and reshaped by grief, regret, and finally growth. But in the cracks of what was broken, they found something stronger. A love not based on perfection, but redemption. In real life, we all face betrayal, disappointment, or loss at some point. And while those things hurt, they also strip us bare enough to see what actually matters. What do we do when we're brought to our knees? Do we run? Or do we rise? With humility, grace, and truth. So, maybe your own life feels messy right now. Maybe you're carrying guilt or pain or fear. But healing doesn't begin when everything is fixed. It begins when we choose to stay. When we show up, quietly, consistently, like Jackson did for Emily and Lily. You see, healing is not about going back to what once was. It's about becoming someone new. Someone softer, stronger, more intentional. If that speaks to you, if this story gave you a glimpse of something deeper, go ahead and like, share, or subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We learn from them, we heal through them, and we grow together. Let's keep seeing life not as right or wrong, but as a journey, flawed, sacred, and worthy of grace. Thanks for being here.